What is the worst thing you've ever seen someone do to their significant other in public? Be a complete tool. It was 8 p.m. and he had sunglasses on inside, lowering his head to peer over them at people. He was in full Ed Hardy gear and was gripping the shoulder of the girl next to him aggressively. She was chatting away excitedly about the food she was going to order. He rolled his eyes at her and didn't listen to a word she had to say. She seemed nice enough, bubbly and friendly and had a hot body, thin, naturally tan, toned with massive melons. They approach the counter and she brightens up as she orders her meal, fries with cheese and gravy. The guy next to her makes a noise of disgust and says loudly, "I can't believe you're eating this crap. You're going to end up like her." He nods behind them, to me. I narrowed my eyes at him as she went on to say she'll have a cola. The guy holds up his hand to her face and goes, "She'll have a water." Oh, he could just be looking out for her well-being, but people should always be allowed to make their own decisions. A significant other does not make it for them. I was livid at this point. Not only had he insulted me, but he'd also completely shut down his own girlfriend. Controlling schmucks don't deserve to be in relationships. Those are the kind of guys that buy into the alpha male BS. Story 2. I was at a LAN party that my friend was hosting, and there were about 10 of us there. One of our friends brought his girlfriend, but wouldn't let her play with us. We kept feeling awful, so I just ended up giving her my controller and letting her play. He goes crazy, smacks the controller out of her hand and tells her to stop bothering us. She tears up and tries to leave, but he talks her into staying. I have no idea why he wants her there, to just sit around and do nothing. He later on tries to pull down her top and feel her up in front of all of us. I ended up driving her home and she broke up with him. We didn't talk to him for like 4 months after that. But why only 4 months? Why not ever? That behavior was worth cutting ties over. Story 3. I have a similar story to LAN parties. We were all hanging out at my friend's house and some of them started a game of League of Legends. The others, including myself, were playing Catan when suddenly I heard a, "What the heck?" His girlfriend, who was a total LOL freak, was up in her seat and smashing the crap out of the keyboard over and over on the desk. She was clearly freaking out and the string expletives were nonstop. "You piece of crap! Are you freaking serious? What the heck did you just do? My God, you freaking suck! Why do you always have to carry the team? How the heck did we lose? You're cut! Cut! Do you understand?" The look on his face was one of shame and shock, and he just quietly got up and exited the room. The girl wasn't even shameful and continued her tirade on how she hated noobs and how she owned in LOL. Wow. Crazy. Story 4. After having LASIK eye surgery to correct an issue with my eyesight the other day, I went with my diabetic sister to a restaurant for a quick bite. She always tries to cheat and will overload in sugar if allowed, and this time was like no other. Behind us was a fat stump of a woman breathing loudly through her mouth and furiously typing into some application on her iPhone called Alien Blue, while I tried to adjust my new prescription glasses to view the menu and simultaneously ensure my sister's safety. Luckily, I caught my sister at the last moment before she was able to order a sugary drink that would have put her in a coma. I don't want her to end up like our poor mother who's now blind and living in a nearby hospital, which I tried to make my sister realize by motioning in the direction of her home. Anyways, we had a delightful dinner, but the blogger behind us took pictures the whole time we ate. I couldn't confront her as I could barely see. I hope she wasn't having some sort of medical meltdown behind us. Story 5. 2 teenagers were getting off the bus with their 3-year-old daughter. The guy kept calling the girl a screwed-up witch and kept raising his hands at her like he was going to slap her while she was holding the little girl. She kept begging him to visit his daughter, and he kept shaking his head and walked away. "That ain't my baby." The mother, still holding the little girl, followed him and he nearly pushed them both into traffic. They were arguing in the curb, but the mother caught her balance. He crossed the street, she followed, and he tried to push her into traffic again. Story 6. I was visiting family up in Ohio when I walked out of a store and saw an arguing couple in the walkway. At this point, she was crying and he was calling her every name in the book. My mind was already boiling because anybody who has the audacity to do that in public is most likely worse in private. But it was just one of those things you had to walk away from. That's when he hit her. I heard a loud slap as he told her to shut up and stop crying. After that, my sight went red. I'm sorry, but at no point is it okay to hit somebody who is not a threat to you or to those with the inability to defend themselves, especially if it is somebody significantly smaller than you. Without hesitation, I dropped my stuff, beeline to them, and the second our eyes met, I decked him in the face. He lost his balance for a second and I took that opportunity to grab him by his clothes and throw him over the railing behind us. He flipped over it and hit the ground hard, and he just started sounding pathetic after that. The girl freaked out but didn't fight me or yell at me or do anything to defend him, so I can be thankful for that. Hopefully that was enough of realization for her. After the initial rush, I told him something along the lines of never touching a girl again. That, unfortunately, was when I met his older brother. I guess he was in a car or something, but At this point, I was walking away and he intercepted me. This guy had an easy 60 to 80 pounds on me, and he used it well, pushing me off my feet with one shove. I got back up and I started doing what I could, but eventually he nailed me in the neck and I almost blacked out, opening my eyes to see him sitting on top of me with my arms pinned to my sides. I wasn't very pretty by the end of it, but the cops were called at some point, so he eventually got off and bolted. Good times. That brother was an enabler. They both deserve bad things to happen to them. Story 7. Unfortunately, my dad was often a schmuck to my mother. Whenever she spoke, he would put her down. If she wanted to go out, she had to call him and ask for permission. Once when I was about 4, we went to a party. The room was very warm and my mother looked flushed with red cheeks. He thought she was wearing makeup, which she wasn't allowed to, and in front of all the guests, told her to wipe that freaking crap from her face. He dragged her to the bathroom and scrubbed her face, kept pointing to the completely white rag and insisting it was pink from the crud on our face. Those were bad memories. I think your dad needs to be institutionalized. Story 8. A few years ago, I was at a house party. There were about 30 people outside, some carelessly drinking while standing in the middle of the street. A loud argument between a couple caught my attention, and I looked in their direction just in time to witness the guy break a beer bottle. Everyone went silent. The guy, looking around nervously, took it upon himself to opine, "What's the problem, witch? You break bottles on each other all the time." I didn't know whether to laugh or get involved. Moments later, a few tap-out clad bros took it upon themselves to chase off the guy with threats of severe To make the whole ordeal worse, I went back outside later to have a smoke, and there was the girl, still soaked in beer, making out with a dude. I left in disgust. If anyone wants to know what a toxic relationship looks like, just show them the story. Story 9. Myself and my now ex-boyfriend of a year were driving to a hockey game in his hometown. We just moved there and I had no idea where I was going. He'd never actually been to the venue himself, so we're driving somewhat aimlessly downtown trying to find it. The entire time he's yelling and screaming at me because we're going to be late. Mind you, I am driving downtown in a new city, all because he doesn't have a driver's license at almost 30. We got to the venue at about 10 after the game started, and we had to park pretty far, seeing as we were so late. The whole walk to the venue, he's about 10 to 15 feet ahead of me, almost running and really angry. There were quite a few people just getting there, walking in the same direction as we were, and he turns around and screams at me to, "Hurry the heck up! I don't want to be late anymore thanks to you." I was so stunned and hurt and embarrassed. Everyone around us heard him, and some people even laughed. I was so mortified. I was so afraid to make him more angry that I sucked it up and went in with him. That guy was a total douche, and I have no clue why he stuck around as long as I did. Story 10. I was at a country music festival with my younger sister. This guy behind us appeared to be really intoxicated and was calling his very petite girlfriend a piece of crap. Ugly witch, every name you could think of. She just kept saying, "Okay, whatever," trying to get him to just chill out. I looked back several times and gave him the look, and it clearly wasn't working. Things escalated after about 30 minutes, and I looked back and he's pulling his arm back like he's going to hit her. I turned around and really loudly said, "Hey, cool it." He called me a witch and told me to mind my own freaking business. At this point, every male within 50 feet was quickly walking over to make sure I didn't get the crap beaten out of me. He left, and I offered his girlfriend my phone to call someone to come pick her up. Probably not the smartest decision I've ever made in regards to my own safety, but you better believe I wasn't going to watch this huge redneck beat the crap out of his tiny girlfriend. Story 11. I was on my way to my dad's house and stopped at a traffic light, and the SUV in front of me began rocking back and forth. I saw a fist fly from the passenger seat to the driver's seat. I exited my vehicle and approached the driver's side. In the driver's seat was a crying woman, but a huge welt in her face. There was a young kid in the back seat. "Ma'am, are you okay? Would you like me to call the police?" Through her tears and crying, she said, "No, I'm okay." Her significant other yelled at me to mind my own business, so I did. I went back to my car, just in time for the light to turn green. We were both in the right turn-only lane, so we both turned right. I gave the SUV some distance and followed, and we were going the same direction anyhow. In the middle of a 55 miles per hour zone, the SUV suddenly came to a complete stop. Apparently, the significant other had yanked the keys out of the ignition. The car started back up and sped off. I was still behind. I pulled into a gas station at the next major intersection. I pulled in and parked at the gas pumps, where they had parked against the building. Significant other jumps out of the passenger side, runs over to the driver's side, and literally rips this poor woman out of the car. Mind you, this is daytime, and there are 15 plus other cars at this very busy gas station. So I pulled my vehicle up and parked directly behind the SUV, cop style, at an angle, making it impossible for them to leave. At this point, I was on the phone with 911, and the sergeant I had been patched to informed me several squad cars were on the way. The man then approached me and threatened to kick my bum, etc. I responded by retrieving Mr. Glock 19 from the glove box, exiting the vehicle, and telling the guy to get on the ground and put his hands behind his head. He complied. The police arrived on scene about 60 seconds after I held him and took him into custody. I testified against him in court several weeks later, and he was sentenced to 2 years in state jail. Moral of the story, don't hit a woman. Ever. Especially not in front of me. Story 12. Let's see. My schmuck of an ex-husband used to verbally, and occasionally physically, mistreat me in front of my friends, out in public, pretty much whenever he felt like it. He and I went to the movies once with a friend of ours. We got into an argument and he proceeded to strand me at the movie theater, taking our friend in her car home. Luckily, we weren't too far from our apartment, so I simply walked home, but it was humiliating. Only once did our friends ever stop him from getting physical with me. During a Super Bowl party, he got mad at me for God knows what and started screaming at me. Then he grabbed my arm and started to drag me outside to discuss things further. Only then did one of our friends, who knew damn well what was going on, finally stepped in to say, "That's enough." My husband was angry beyond belief, but at least didn't actually harm me in front of people we knew. Years later, I'm now in an awesome relationship and thankful that I'm not still married to a monster. Story 13. Not quite something that I saw, but rather saw a result of. I study Scream at a local martial arts studio, which also teaches Taekwondo. During one of the kids' Taekwondo classes, the lead instructor took out some of those pads that looked sort of like castanets. Someone else probably knows what they're called. The reason they look like that is because when you hit one side, it collides with the other to make a loud smacking sound. Anyway, the instructor was talking to the class and hit the bag and noticed one of the little girls screamed, covered her rear, and started crying. Now imagine the glare of a man with 6 black belts, 2 of which are 7th degrees. This is the look the instructor gave this girl's apparently cruel parents. They never came back to the school. You should have done something about it. Story 14. I wasn't here, but this happened to one of my roommates. She just joined a sorority this past semester of school and was taking her on-again, off-again boyfriend to the spring formal. It was her birthday weekend, and she was really excited to have a nice and fun event to go to with him, as they had been having problems prior to this and were just getting back to normal. She has an incredibly fit and athletic body and was wearing a really tight-fitting dress, so other guys at the formal were checking her out. Her boyfriend saw this and snapped on her for it within 10 minutes of being there. He started yelling at her in front of all her new sisters and friends for being a witch and about how he can't trust her, even though she did nothing to facilitate the being looked at wrong. He brought up all of her close guy friends whom she hung out with, but didn't actually do anything with when they were broken up. Not to mention the last time they broke up, he didn't actually tell her. She found out when she went over to see him and his roommates told her he was at a party trying to get with some random girls. She left that formal sobbing within the first half hour of being there, and her craphead boyfriend stayed all night to partake in the free sorority booze with his buddies. She took him back 3 days later. My God, know your worth, girl. Story 15. I won tickets to a water park through a radio show recently, and we went with 4 other couples, as well as the DJs. The show had hired a limo for the day, which naturally was stocked with alcohol. We hadn't even gotten into the highway before the alcohol was opened. Halfway there, it was about 1.5 hours to get there. The guy next to my wife was completely intoxicated and was talking to us about how he and his girlfriend liked to watch porn and tried the things they saw. His girlfriend, who was right next to him, was looking at us horrified, shaking her head and going, "Who are you with? That's not us." He just kept talking and ignored her. Story 16. I still think about this sometimes and feel horrible with myself for not saying anything. I was in line to check in for a flight, and there was a couple behind me with a child in a stroller who couldn't be much more than about a year old. The child's skin was tinted yellow, obviously jaundiced. Another person in line made a comment about how well-behaved the child was. The line was taking a really long time. The mom said that they were flying to some hospital to do an organ transplant. A few minutes later, I overheard the couple talking quietly amongst themselves, and the man started speaking to her in pretty harsh tones. Something about how she always talks too freaking much, and by the way, she forgot to pack something they needed, and she was so freaking stupid. I got a glimpse of her face as I glanced behind me, and it was painfully obvious that she was completely miserable in that relationship. I was toughing it out for her sick kid. Story 17. I was sitting in the car with my mom and dad, and my dad was having one of his rages while at the wheel and stopped at an intersection. After yelling and calling my mom every name in the book to the point where she had tears streaming down her face, I tried to force her out of the car. But she protests desperately and doesn't budge, so he says, "Screw you then. I'm walking home." He pulls the keys out of the ignition, gets out of the car, slams the door behind him, and starts walking the 40 kilometers to our house, leaving myself and my sobbing mom in the middle of a busy intersection with no keys to start the car and every nearby vehicle honking the horn and screaming at us. Did he get run over? Please tell me he got run over. Story 18. I had a friend or housemate whose girlfriend treated him like crap. He tried to break it off a few times, but she wouldn't let him. I was never clear on how that worked, but it probably involved their close families and mutual friends. I was neither. We were at a party at his house, and things were going well. She was being chatty and flirty with other guys, as she often did, but was just having a good time, talking to lots of people. At some point, they disappear from the party, and you start hearing shouting from his room. We don't know whether to intervene or not, but they both just shouting through a semi-closed door, so we kind of let them go. Basically, he's calling her out on her crap. She's going for petty insults. Then she sees there are people outside the door and immediately bursts into tears. Now he's a dude yelling at a crying woman. He realizes what's going on, smashes something of his against the wall. All attention is now on the situation. Ladies take the girl away downstairs. I try to talk my friend down. When I come downstairs, she's spreading a sob story, alluding that he might have hit her, etc. Basically trying to make him look like a monster for finally standing up to her. I realize this doesn't seem like much, but it came at the end of years of this crap, and I couldn't believe how a person could do that to someone they cared about. Two of us, one lady and myself, took her and her friend or flatmate outside and I hailed a cab. We put them in it. They gave the cabbie a 20 and told him to take them home. She smiles and thanks me for being so caring. I leaned in through the open window and whispered that she's doomed to me, and if she ever sets foot in my house again, I'm calling the cops. The shocked face she made as the cabbie drove off wasn't satisfying at the time, but now that they've been broken up for years, it's a very fond memory. Story 19. I used to date a guy that would have these horrible anxiety attacks. Seriously, one of the nicest guys ever, but when he got wound up, he would bark orders of what he needed. It was really harmless and truly never aimed at me, but you tend to get a lot of people staring at you, and the guy you're with is gripping your forearm in a Best Buy and shouting, "I need to leave here now! I don't care if you come, but I'm leaving now!" Or you're sitting at a table and he's gruffly saying, "Can you get me some water? I need some water now!" People would always glare at him and think I was this weak woman staying with a cruel man, but honestly, his urgency was understandable once you watched him have a full attack. He would often pass out or retch and would finish his attack sobbing, which can really be humiliating in front of a large crowd of people. The harsh tone was entirely accidental, and he would usually grab my arm because he was dizzy and said I helped ground him. I only got a small bruise once from him grabbing me, but he proceeded to pass out and fall very hard and kind of yanked me down with him, and afterwards, he felt horribly guilty. The guy was great, but his panic attacks were stressful for me as well, and we wound up breaking up. But I always felt bad that he got grouped into this horrible schmuck category like the rest of those guys. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 20. Not sure if this will count. I recently moved into an apartment downtown, and our view out the window is looking down at a bar. I was watching some TV when I heard some pretty insane yelling. I get up and move toward the window where I see a group of about 10 guys arguing with one another. I'm watching and thinking that these guys are a second away from fighting. I get my phone out to maybe call the police to come and check it out, but it's too late. Several guys pair up and start fighting. Most of them aren't even landing anything and just moving around, but one guy, literally 6'4" and about 250 pounds, just lays this one guy out. He gets knocked unconscious, and I'm on the phone telling police where it's happening, but then the huge motherfreaking guy goes up to the kid he just knocked out and starts kicking his head into the cement. And this girl goes up to the guy who's curb-stomping her boyfriend and starts pulling on his shirt to make him stop. The guy turns around, pauses because he thinks it's probably another guy, and straight up punches his girlfriend, and now she's laid out onto the street too. I instantly ran downstairs and started to tend to the guy and the girl until the police and Gold Cross came. I'm an EMT and feature med student. The guy apparently tried to flee down the street, got in his car, and a good Samaritan who saw what happened from his vehicle parked behind him so he couldn't drive off. Talked to the police afterwards, and the most messed up thing was, after the guy did all that, and while I was running downstairs, he went up to another guy and bit the guy. Another person who needs to be institutionalized. Story 21. I worked in a water park for about a year. One day I began hearing reports on my radio about a family, couple and a young son, that were causing a scene by the locker rooms. Apparently the wife had lost the car keys, so the husband was now yelling at her and screaming at her in full public. She just stood there and took it with an embarrassed look on her face. The supervisor stood nearby in case things became physical. He was a big weightlifter, so he was our go-to guy in physical confrontations. I just wish there was something that we could have done. It was obviously an unhealthy relationship. Story 22. My ex's brother was a complete lunatic. He was dating a girl for years that he was physically and verbally cruel. I never understood why she stayed. All he did was take her money and use it on substances. She worked all the time just to support his habit while she lived in utter squalor. I remember one instance of his cruelty that came out of nowhere. We were all standing in the yard joking and hanging out when he walked up and knocked her. Then he proceeded to scream in her face all sorts of slanderous remarks while she laid there unconscious. My ex did nothing. I was scared to speak for fear that he would harm me, so I got up and walked into the house and called the cops. He went away for a while, but she remained with him till he left her for another user. So sad. Story 23. I first became aware a friend of mine was a cruel knob and my wife and I were having dinner with his wife. I've known this guy since he was 18. He was fun, smart, and had a great sense of humor. When he got married in his 20s, he and his bride seemed like a happy couple until we started hanging around him more. His wife was always quiet with a small smile, and so we tried to include her in our circle because we wanted to get to know her better and so she wouldn't feel like an outsider. One night, we were out at a theme bar and they were serving drinks that were kind of exotic. His wife, who was normally very quiet, ordered one that had a glow stick in it, which made him raise an eyebrow. But he said, "I'll allow it." At some point, we're laughing and having a good time when she starts playing with the umbrella in her drink like it's a real parasol over her head, and then puts it in her hair. My friend started to change mood drastically. Then she did the unthinkable and took the glow stick and put it between her just to be silly. She wasn't being flirtatious, and the table atmosphere had been casual and silly. But my friend then crossed his arms, very slowly and purposefully, and glared at her. He stared her down but said nothing. She did the usual, "What?" thing, but quickly she started to break down. She got quiet, took the glow stick out, and then placed it on the table and stared at the table blankly. He kept glaring at her, and the longer he did it, the more shy and withdrawn she looked until she started to tremble and tried not to cry. Then he stopped and calmly looked at us and pretended like nothing had happened with a "so anyway" kind of attitude, like his wife had completely embarrassed him, and he put an end to that right away. She never spoke a word the rest of the night, and he ignored her. My wife and I were shocked and didn't know what to do. It was the first hint we had that he was very controlling and cruel, and as the months went on, it became rather obvious she was miserable and scared. Thankfully, that poor girl eventually left him, and her ex-husband is no longer a friend. Good riddance. Story 24. Some foreign friends and I, while studying in Japan, were leaving a grocery store after buying crap loads of meat for our evening barbecue. In front of us, a Japanese couple was walking side by side, as couples often do, with him holding the grocery bags. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until he screamed obscenities at her, pushed her down, threw the grocery bags at her, and stormed off in the opposite direction they seemed to have been headed. We helped her up and together her solid groceries and saw that she was already in tears and terribly shaken. We had to all but physically restrain our Texan friend from chasing the douche down to give him a piece of her mind. Story 25. My brother and I were invited to a party by a girl who had been after since high school. Everyone there was trashy and had been drinking since 2 in the afternoon. It was pretty much married or living together couples. We tried to blend in and catch up on drinking a little, but it became obvious that we just weren't fitting in. Somehow the conversation turned to 2 of the girls discussing making out. So the husband and boyfriend told them if the girls made out for 5 minutes, they would each give the girls $100. So the girls go at it. This was freaking hot watching 2 20-something girls French kiss. At the 3-minute mark, they paused for a second to swallow, catch their breath of otherwise aggressive lip lock, then continue. The guys refused to pay up because they didn't do it for a complete 5 minutes. This starts an argument which gets more and more heated. The girls refuse to drop it. One couple gets into a heated debate where other stuff about her job and his truck get thrown into the mix. Their anger seemed to run its course, but it's tense. The couple sit near each other quietly for a few minutes. Then the guy just jumps up, grabs his girl by the hair, and attempts to haul her home. This prompts another guy to get in his face and tell him that this was not the way guys treat their women. They have a chest-to-chest stare down. At this point, my brother and I noped the crap out of there. My brother's friend told us that pretty much the same thing happened every Friday. After a few hours, someone would end up fighting someone. The guy that came to the defense of the other guy's girl had beaten his girl up more than once as well. They were confused as to why we left and the party was just getting good. Getting good? What do you mean? Story 26. I used to have a really bad weight problem. I weighed 334 pounds and was able to get down to 155. I'm 5'6", but naturally big-boned. I'm female. It was Christmas Eve and I invited my then-boyfriend to my extended family's house to celebrate. There would be relatives there who hadn't seen me since my weight loss, so I was excited. I was wearing a pair of size 8 jeans and feeling pretty damn good. They were all oohing and eyeing over me, but my boyfriend just sat silently. Finally, my cousin says, "Patrick, doesn't she look great?" And he goes, she could lose another 30. I was mortified. This was the first time they had met him. Needless to say, we aren't together anymore. Story 27. I play in a non-competitive kickball league. We were playing this team full of married couples. One of the wives fumbled and dropped a ball that would have led to an easy out. She's laughing because, well, she was embarrassed and everyone else was laughing with her except her husband. He said loudly, "Why didn't you catch that? It was so easy. Stop laughing. It isn't funny. We're going to lose." He then noticed he was being a prick as his wife looked like she was tearing up a little. He then walked over and tried to kiss her and he got rejected. Serves him right. Story 28. I was going to a restaurant in Huntington Beach, California, on Main Street with my fiancé. When I was a kid, this place was cool to walk around and check out the surf or skate shops. We get to a restaurant, eat, proceed to leave, and as we walk to the car, I see this rather attractive young lady running across the street to a parking lot. She was chasing a guy, screaming, "Why you gotta talk crap, huh?" They exchange words and he takes a swing and misses. I stopped, phone in hand, authorities dialed in, just waiting to call. Then the lady's friend chases after them and breaks it up, and all is well. Not even a block away, I see a bicycle flying 10 feet in the area and a huge intoxicated guy saying, "Get the heck out of here, you stupid witch." I just grabbed my fiance's hand and power walked us to the car to get the heck out of that crap hole. Every time I go to that crap hole of a main street, I think, you will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious. Story 29. I once made the mistake of dating a guy who was the schmuck of all schmucks. The only reason he had me around was to support him in a grow up. It forced me to quit working for a family business because a $1 raise every 6 months wasn't good enough for him. I got a job working for a canvassing company. I knew it was a total scam, so I quit after 2 days. The day I quit, I had met him at a bar where he had been drinking, on my dime, all night, so that I could try to get my debit card from him and leave, but it was obvious that he was totally trashed and extremely angry. Once I gave up the debit card, I tried to get away from him and back to his house first so I could get my valuables and go to my parents' house before he beat the crap out of me, but I had no such luck. He found me at the bus stop and started terrorizing me right there in front of probably 6 or 7 other people, calling me names, telling me I'm a worthless witch and that I deserve to pass away, and on and on. After standing there and trying to ignore him while trying to find a way to call the cops without him noticing, I eventually retorted and he spit in my face, slapped me, knocked my phone from my hand, breaking it. Some guys across the street noticed what happened and started to cross and do something about it. My ex took off his shirt, pulled a knife, and made them walk away. He proceeded to yell at me more and say, "I saw you looking at them. You wanted those guys to come over and beat me up and then do you, didn't you? You don't care about me at all, you worthless witch. Blah, blah." Then he ran off for literally no reason I could see. He just ran. Before the bus came, he ran back to me and was crying and apologizing. I regrettably went back home with him that night, and a few weeks later got a restraining order against him. Wow, another one to be institutionalized. Story 30. I was in a supermarket in the afternoon and passed a couple in their mid-50s or early 60s, and the woman asked her husband if he could read her something on a package because she forgot her glasses. He yelled at the top of his lungs something about how he was not going to be put out because she was a freaking idiot that forgot her glasses. This woman was very diminutive and had her head down and looked like he put her down all the time. It got really hot, really fast seeing this. So I went up to him and said, "Come talk to me that way. I bet you won't." I'm 6 feet and a pretty strong girl, which was 4 inches taller than him, and proceeded to help the lady read the crap she needed, and he went out to the car, never having responded to my comment. Story 31. I was once walking up the street late one evening when I was approached by a young teen, likely about 15 or so. I was asked, "Yo, you got anything I can use to tap that fat bum over there? I don't want to catch nothing." He then motioned to a teen girl that was just slightly up the street. I, a married man, don't carry rubbers on me, so I said, "No, I don't." Hopefully she has the sense to not be interested. Apparently he didn't hear or didn't care, because he immediately turned around and yelled to the young girl, "Hey witch, get your bum over here. Time to start walking. This guy doesn't have anything for us." This was the part that saddened me most. She followed, giggling and smiling the whole time. She was referred to as a witch and insulted repeatedly. I shook my head, wondering how anyone can be happy about being treated like a piece of meat. Story 32. I was walking along a street in a big town. In a nearby corner, a motorbike was waiting at a red light, with a guy driving and a girl sitting behind him. When the red light switched to green, the guy accelerated. However, he clearly overdid it because the front wheel started to lift, and within a second or so, the motorbike was in a vertical position. First, the girl fell, then the guy, and then the motorbike came to a loud halt a couple of meters down the road. The guy got up instantly, while the girl was lying on the road and didn't move. Immediately, a small crowd appeared around the girl and tried to help her. The guy, however, first walked to his motorbike to check if there was any damage. Only after taking care of his bike did he come to see how the girl was doing. By then, she was standing, apparently not hurt, but shaking. The only thing the guy said, "Babe, you know this wasn't the first time this happened, and you know it won't be the last time." Story 33. I was hanging out on the porch of my frat house, bite me, drinking a few beers late one night with a buddy or two when I saw on the sidewalk this guy clearly arguing with his girlfriend. Now, normally I wouldn't pay too much mind, but this was not your run-of-the-mill argument. She was crying and clearly extremely upset, and he was laying into her for some reason or another. I motioned to my buddy if he's seeing this, and just about then, the guy bucks up like he was about to hit her right there on the street in the middle of campus. We both get up and hurry over to confront him as he's clearly about to beat down this girl. We tell him to lay off and go the heck home, and he starts getting smart with us and is still screaming at his girl right in front of us. At this point, I'm about ready to swing on him, but fortunately we were able to get him to ignore her long enough to get her to go home. She left, and he eventually walked on home in a different direction, looking angry and still calling us out. And that was the day I prevented mistreatment. This guy was a schmuck. Should have given him a black eye or two. Story 34. I'm eating at a pretty nice, expensive place because I had a 70-hour work week and wanted to treat myself. This girl and 5 of her girlfriends come in, obviously a girl's night out. They're trailed by a rather down-looking guy. They make gossipy girl chat. Much of it my stupid boyfriend, and much of that from the girl whose boyfriend was right there. He's just looking depressed and not saying much. I remember overhearing something to the effect of, "Has he fixed your car yet?" No, the lazy schmuck. Followed by a swift smack to the head. I ended up getting up, going over and voicing my opposition, to which they responded, "Mind your own freaking business." I went over to the head waiter, who looked over just as she hit him again. However, given it was girl on guy, plus maybe the fact that they were ordering a lot, he saw no problem with it. He finished, and he of course footed the bill for all of them, which had to have been at least $300. On the way out, he says, "Hey, it's still a bit early. Do you think I could go catch the end of the game with my friends?" What? You selfish schmuck? Followed by another strike. Story 35. Back in the mid-90s, my friends and I were calling all of our connections, but unable to find anyone with grass. So a friend of a friend tells us that he knows a guy. We page him, he calls us back, and tells us to meet him at a parking lot behind a Wendy's. We show up. He was already there in his Pontiac Fiero with his girlfriend. They both get out of the car, we make our transaction, and the girl asks us what we're doing tonight, basically just making small talk. This idiot turns around, slaps her, takes the gum out of his mouth and puts it in her hair, yelling at her to shut up. She starts screaming at him and he pulls a gun out of his pants and she drops to her knees, crying and begging him not to end her. He proceeds to talk crap, none of which I remember. I say, Billy, chill out, man. No need for that." It starts chuckling in this really messed up, creepy, detached way and puts away the gun. Last time I ever bought anything from anyone I didn't know. Story 36. I was in line behind a young couple at a crowded lunchery. I was sort of creepy looking at the time. I basically dressed like a homeless person. Army jacket, long hair and beard, jeans with holes in them. Also, I'm a fairly large person. The man of the couple looked back at me, then told his girlfriend that he had forgotten his wallet in the car, and walked past me towards the door. The girlfriend kept place in queue, but the man didn't go to the door. He stopped behind me, reached around me, grabbed her, then hid behind me. She jumped and screamed. I'd already been standing uncomfortably close behind her. She almost slapped me, but he fell over laughing just in time to save me. At first, I was mortified, but in a moment, I realized how hilarious it was. I don't know how to feel about that. Story 37. Not as awful as some of the stories here, but my ex, we were together 14 years, used to be so cold to me when we were out. When we split up and he moved away, I went out one night and one of my friends, yes, friends, asked me where my friend or cousin was. I had to laugh. He was genuinely surprised when he realized we were practically married. Our mutual friends hated the way he treated me. I could not touch him, and most of the time he would not acknowledge me in public. I did catch him out, though, near the end. I knew his work was having a Christmas do, and he told me it was for employees only. I was walking through town with him, and we saw one of his colleagues. We were chatting, and his colleague said to me, "Oh, so are you coming to the Christmas party then?" I just looked at my ex and replied that I was going out by myself with friends that night. My ex did not like that. He would also do things like call me while I was in the uni lectures, just ask where his keys or lighter were. Always got annoyed if I went out with my mates, and half the time he had to cancel. And my favorite, not turning up to his niece's christening because his trousers were a little creased. I did all the cooking, cleaning, washing, dog walking, shopping, and when I told him I wanted a baby, he told me I should organize it then. We broke up shortly after my dad passed, and I was devastated losing my dad. He looked at me one day and said, "Why are you so miserable lately? I don't know why I spent 14 years trying to make it work, but that is what it does to you." Now I have the most amazing man in my life, who, quite frankly, if he meets my ex, would like to punch him. Very hard. Yeah, same here. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.